BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and I feel like I keep getting influenced by social media to keep making topics or videos that I've always been hesitant on making. But then I realize if I don't make them, someone's going to do it before I can, and I really want to make sure that I want to be the one that just does it and stop being lazy or hesitant. Let me know if that's sort of some weird complex that I have. But as I was finishing up the last Yu-Gi-Oh video, apparently it has not been 10 years since the Powerpuff Girls 2016 reboot dropped, and naturally everyone's going out of their way to roast it. I do not think the show is good. Remember, I said that. And it's emblematic of the fact that Cartoon Network was trying to homogenize their shows to be too similar, as evidenced by the Ben 10 reboot, where Man of Action was limited in what they could do with the episodes. For example, ironically last year, I believe when I talked about the comparisons between Beyblade's Metal Saga and Burst, alongside the other hobby anime reboots in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or in future installments like Digimon, Pokemon, and Bakugan. When I talked about the first Bakugan reboot, I brought up that Spin Master was told by the network to make their episodes 11 minutes instead, and that kids were more interested in comedy and shorter content, according to them. According to one of the writers on the Ben 10 reboot, Cartoon Network wanted two 11-minute episodes so that they could mix and match shows, one new, one old, and work better for comedy. Now, I know talking about whether or not these shows are reboots is a bit of a contentious take, because Teen Titans Go, it's like its own thing, but using the 2003 show as a basis, so it's like a quasi-spinoff built off New Teen Titans. Powerpuff Girls 2016 feels more like a requel/sequel. Total Dramarama was mandated because Cartoon Network told Fresh TV they weren't interested in making competition seasons and thought that a show for teenagers wouldn't do well with children, so that's more of a spin-off. Roar was basically doomed from the beginning as a new continuity because Thundercats isn't as big as an IP compared to Teen Titans, alongside the fact that the 2011 show was treated terribly by Cartoon Network to the point where they had to move it to Toonami because the toys weren't selling as well and Bandai discontinued the toy line. And yet somehow that Legends of Shima show got blamed or accused of canceling Thundercats 2011, despite that show not being able to achieve that much success to the point where Shima only got 3 seasons. That show was okay though. But then you have Teen Titans Go making a fake crossover with Roar by using the backlash people had to make an entire episode where they took voice clips from the Roar trailer without actually using any of the Thundercats Roar's cast besides one of the leads, used a dead character when one of their actors was dead, which is even worse when you remember that the guys who made Teen Titans Go were also the same people who worked on the Thundercats 2011 show. Look, when I tell you guys the Cartoon Network sabotaged every single one of their reboots, I mean it. But I did say this was about Powerpuff Girls, so I need to talk about a few controversies and misinformation people spread. Before I get into the root problems, first off, the cringy rapping someone had edited and posted on the Powerpuff Girls wiki to have Bubbles dressed up as a prostitute and holding a smoking cigarette, which clearly edited to make it look like that was what the show was promoting. However, not only was that not true when you actually look up the proper episode itself, while the outfit is similar, the pants were edited and she was wearing a blue attire with the clothes, not what the stripper edit had. So no, the reboot was not trying to promote prostitution through minors. The second controversy was that the character Jared Shapiro, aka Blossom's trendy crush/boyfriend/friend, that isn't naturally going to get together with him because some people don't know how to put in the effort to write a believable romance. Anyway, the accusations were that he was an intentional self-insert of the writer Jake Goldman because the two look alike and that misinformation has spread like wildfire. And it's not helped that Jake also voiced Jared. However, this got blown out of proportion to people accusing him of being a child predator and claiming that he wanted to bang Blossom, which isn't true in the slightest, not to mention that the self-insert rumors were entirely false. Basically, one of the artists on the show revealed that when the character was first created, the artist on the show thought it would be funny to model a nerdy love interest after him, and then because of that figured it was fitting for him to voice act him. And yes, despite the concern, it didn't change things behind the scenes because they didn't see a problem with it. And like me, they also point out, like, I'm not defending the show, I'm just explaining stuff and trying to stop people from spreading rumors of Jake being a creep like wildfire because, well, we have no evidence of him doing any wrongdoing. And boy, how do you have people still spreading this rumor like wildfire and it basically accuse him of committing a crime when I've had to look up everything the writer was done and I haven't found any evidence of him getting involved with that for Christ's sake or any criminal activity. Also, the fact that why would Cartoon Network hire someone like that if they had a criminal background? The worst part about the criticism I don't hear anyone mention is that when you remember that the Powerpuff Girls went to an elementary school, we don't get an age for Jared. He's likely between the ages of 6 and 10, but they have to at least be in the same grade or take the same class if they know each other. And in elementary school, the only classes that would have 2 grades in it would be the special ed classes, and it'd be like kinder and first, second and third, and in universe, they don't have any reason for them to take those classes. Plus, there's no logical reason for an older kid to have that much contact with a younger kid in a school like that, yet people are saying he was a middle or high schooler. There is a valid argument that whenever creators put themselves or lookalikes of the staff into their stories, like even Craig, the original creator, did that, they would do it in a self-depreciation tone, while the writers of HAL 2016 were much more liberal in that regard. But that's still not an excuse to spread misinformation or accuse someone of doing a crime they didn't commit. Again, technically the showrunners didn't do anything wrong, but if it were up to me, given the PR and the backlash on how the internet reacts, I would have at least had Jared be recast, while my other criticism tends to be that whenever they do the crush imaginations, they always make Jared look way bigger than he actually is, when usually you would just make the character the same size, would just put a bunch of light filters to make them look dreamy. But I will get to my dislike of Jared later. That being said, if I have one person in the writing staff I would give valid criticism to besides their writing was Julia Vickerman, who did work on the show, but people found a post that she made in the past about stalking a minor and wanting to do things with him. Allegedly, she ended up going to court and was found not guilty of doing anything, which, thank God, I don't want an actual victim from this. But naturally, everyone parted ways with her, and her other show that she was working on got canceled. Now, to say she had no impact on the reboot was debatable because she has storyboarding and writing credits on 14 episodes, but she stopped working on the series halfway through season 2, which, good. Please don't think, express, or support doing anything with minors against their consent or inappropriate. We're supposed to be role models for the next generation, not abusers. And before I start holding the writers accountable for their mistakes, Cartoon Network also needs to take some of the blame for some of the behind-the-scenes issues, which ranges from the fact that Cartoon Network changed the voice actresses for all the Powerpuff Girls but none of the men because they wanted to infuse new energy into the reboot, despite all 3 of the voice actresses willing to return and most of the male cast from some of the villains and Professor came back. The new standards at the network prevented a lot of the action scenes from being as creative and fluid as they could be next regulations. Cartoon Network was the one that marketed an episode of having a transgender reference, even though the writers never wanted there to be one in the first place. And apparently the executive producers removed Miss Bellum because she wasn't the right message they wanted to spread at the time. I have no idea what that means, but they wrote her off so they couldn't mess her up, I guess. Plus, the reason why Craig didn't return was because he was busy working on Wander Over Yonder. As for why the show came back around that time, Cartoon Network noticed that the Powerpuff Girls was getting a brief popularity resurgence in the early 2010s. Even with the show's negative reputation, the series was actually doing pretty well in terms of merchandise sales that was outdoing the 1998 show at the time. But by the time season 3 began, the revenue started plummeting, and that's probably why season 3 was the last season. Ironically, a couple years later, in 2021, the merchandise for 2016 got phased out while merchandise for the 1998 show regained popularity. Funny how that works. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some of the issues and wasted potential the show had. And no, I'm not going to talk about the obvious subjects like the bad attempts to be modern, the singing, the animation issues, the weird faces, and the twerking. Those are all bad. But I want to focus on the characterization, the villains, and the stories. Regarding the girls, this is the problem that I had with Z, but I feel like the show kinda hates Blossom. She gets the least number of focus episodes, and the ones that are really good are few and far between. And one of the wasted ideas that I've seen people complain about is the fact that Bubbles and Buttercup are technically more interested in Blossom in the show, because it robs the girls of having their own individual personalities. My problem is that the show didn't take the opportunity to have the girls learn from each other and grow to apply the other girls' specialties into their own personalities. For example, there were episodes where Bubbles got involved in using technology. Have Blossom teach her. There was an entire episode about Buttercup doing math. Have Blossom be the one that helps her get better at math to the point Buttercup starts appreciating it. Then Buttercup gets it in over her head, messes up, and Blossom has to help bail her out. Or make an episode where Buttercup is trying to help out the girls get into athletic sports, with Bubbles finding gymnastics while Blossom takes up a sport that has strategic depth, like ice hockey, baseball, or soccer. Okay, no one liked how the professor turned into a bumbling idiot outside of like the 2 episodes he was competent, and Bliss's reputation is still divisive to this day. The problem with the backstory is that the professor isn't normally the type of person that would just abandon or hide his first attempt at a child, when the really simple solution could have been that he made Bliss first by accident and was trying to come up with a way to stabilize her, then reveal him kidnapped her, but she escaped and the professor tried to find her, but him got to her first, shapeshifted to look like he was a friend that was just trying to help her out, then lied that the professor abandoned her and didn't care. It would make the professor look less like someone who was abandoned or hid his child away, but show that he was actually someone who did care about the child, but just wasn't fast enough to be quicker than the opportunist who wanted to take advantage of her, and show that he used the opportunity to make sure that he wouldn't let the same thing happen to when he fixed the formula to make the Powerpuff Girls. Again, I actually don't hate Bliss, although my major concern is that she could have looked a bit more like the girls instead of looking like a teenager. She's at least 2 years older than the girls, so make her like slightly taller but, you know, don't make her look too grown. Who's ready for the Jared rants? Jared is just boring, underwritten, and lazily put together. Apparently, Powerpuff Girls fans are kind of torn about whether or not the main character should get love interests. I've seen one fanfiction attempt that was decent at it, but like I said with every romance video on this channel, it depends on the execution. And I don't like to use the term boring because that is subjective, but the writers didn't give him any personality or attributes to make Blossom like or love him other than the fact that we were just told that they like each other. Outside of just stating that they're in the same class and age and redesigning him so he looks less stereotypical, what I would have done was to make him a mix of a kid genius around the same age, a la Dexter, Ken from Z, and or Izzy from Digimon Adventure. To give them more personality, we can give him a bit of an ego, but, you know, not make him a bad person. Also have him build technology and weapons and would like to help out every now and then, and is also the one that actually acclimates the girls to the school as their first friend. So you can actually see Blossom and the rest of the gang bonding with him instead of just us being told that they like each other. The villains are just weird to talk about because the ones that were returning were very oddly handled. Him is probably the best. Mojo was all over the place. Morbucks has like one good episode and they barely use some of the other ones like Fuzzy. The new villains were also a mixed bag because like Silicone is the one everyone agrees was either good or had like the most potential, with just his backstory being the problem, to the point where his finale where he ends up being trapped in his own delusions thinking that he won was actually a fitting end for the character. Jemica was introduced as his rival thief and in the finale just has her be like this super powerful god, which was cool, but it had like no build up and was only one episode. Why not set the fact up that Jemica was now in this weakened state and now she's trying to get back different artifacts that can help her regain her full form, and then have the show hint at her alter ego until the reveal. There's also a few one-shot villains that were really cool, like Spord, who presented himself as a student, but would infiltrate different planets before destroying them and then try to do the same thing to the girls, but he was only kind of used for like that Bliss special. Duplicate was cool because she could multiply herself, other people, or objects, and Butterfinger's motivation was that he wanted to be a superhero and resorted to stealing Buttercup's body because he believes that being a superhero is just solely about fighting bad guys for action instead of protecting people and then try to kill her. That's actually pretty interesting. And yet they're only used once! Personally, I didn't mind the fashionistas, and making fun of the Manosphere losers is something they could have executed a lot better with Manboy. But no one liked the leg roll, the Gant, and the Pugface, and yet they got used more? At least they done pack rat, but still. And the last mistake I feel like Cartoon Network made was like what I said before. Craig couldn't return as showrunner because he had his contract with Disney Television Animation and he was producing Wander Over Yonder while the show was in production. So the executive producer was Bob Boyle of Yin Yang Yo and Nick Jennings. I feel like Bob should have used his connections in the industry to try to get writers with more experience, because from what I found in the IMDb pages, Haley and Jake didn't have a ton of writing credits at the time, but they were somewhat experienced with writing. But this was their first time doing something like this, and I feel like if you're going to work on an established IP, I think it's good to have some veteran writers help out or guide the newbies so that by the end they would be fine. Shadow Streak reviewed all the episodes, and I believe he said if the show was like it was during either season 3 or towards the middle of season 2, the show wouldn't have been so negatively received, and I agree because there's actually a few episodes I remember liking from this show. Also, I feel like if Cartoon Network was going to try to make all their shows feel homogenized, at least like Teen Titans Go, they should have let the writers be allowed to use more fluid animation or give the show a bigger budget, because I've seen Teen Titans Go fights absolutely slap, and yet this show didn't get the opportunity for that, and yet the crossover handled them and the action better. But that's it. Okay, I really got to stop delaying working on the Mega Man video, but I've seen enough people talk about this, so I wanted to get my 2 cents out there, as well as debunked information that's still being spread to this day. Look, I still don't like the show, and ironically, when I was in college, I actually tried to apply to be a story editor for a different show. But if I could go back and put myself in that writer's room, I would definitely think I could have made the show a lot better than what it actually ended up being. Which is a shame, because I did see potential, but sadly it wasn't meant to be. But thankfully we know that Craig is working on a Powerpuff Girls show, and I've heard that it might be a bit more story-oriented, so I'm looking forward to see how that plays out. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and tell me, who is your favorite Powerpuff Girl? Mine is Blossom. What do you think of Powerpuff Girls Z? I like it, though I have some issues with it. What would you like me to do next, or talk about next? And when do you think I'm going to get the Mega Man video done? Hopefully before Thursday, please. If you made it this far, type stop wasting potential. Thanks for watching, and BIP Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.